called The Trust God Story, and it's from Max Otto. I don't know if you can read this, but I like his books, partly because they cover one page and I can get it read, for a quick devotional at night or during the day. But the ways of the Lord are right. The righteous walk in them. As God's story becomes yours, closed doors take on a new meaning. You no longer see them as interruptions of your plan, but as indication of God's plan. This is what Paul learned. God blocked his missionary team from going north, south, or east. Only west remained. The closed doors in Asia led to an open-armed invitation to Philippi. Once there, Paul and his team got to work. Their efforts in Philippi were so effective that the pagan religion leaders were angered. So they conjured up a story against Paul and Silas. The multitude rose up together against them, and the magistrates tore off their clothes and commanded them to be beaten with rods. And when they had laid many strips on them, they threw the men into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. Listen closely. Do you hear it? The old familiar sound of keys turning and locks clicking. Paul and Silas could have groaned, "Oh no, not another locked door." But they didn't complain. From the bowels of the prison emerged the most unexpected sound of praise and prayer. Their feet were in stocks, yet their minds were in heaven. How could they sing at a time like this? From whence came their song? There is only one answer. They trusted God and his story for them. So I think sometimes we don't think about all of this. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. And I have, every now and then I get a little flash that says your internet is unstable. So if you don't hear me or something, let me know somehow. Okay. Okay, I did this wrong. It's getting quicker every time. So thank you. So I just thought today what we would do is take a look at where we are before we go on. And there's a reason for that. One, I want you to kind of, because we had that 2-week break or close to 2 weeks, I kind of want to just talk about where we are. So the overview and dynamics of those who suffer with anxiety and the strengths and weaknesses of family origin were there. We talked about anxiety as a message and the four functions of healthy anxiety. We talked about how goals eliminate unnecessary anxiety, but not all anxiety, right? So that's our goal. We need to have some anxiety in our life because it is a protection. And also the third week, we talked about deep breathing, relaxation, and then we had those wonderful introductions where I got to find out more about each one of us. And then the last week or 2 weeks ago was cognitive distortions, where we kind of talk about how sometimes we don't think about things right, or we tell ourselves messages that aren't exactly true. That makes some sense? Good. So let's go back and look at today. I'm trying to get this moved. So today we're talking about the driving forces behind anxiety, the disempowerment while growing up, and the time of COVID and quarantine. So kind of taking it from youth and going to today. And so what I would like to do is switch that around and talk about COVID and corporate, because we talked a lot about that during the last sessions and there were questions. So is that okay with everyone if I kind of switch that around? Okay, good. And then next week, we'll talk about goals, missions, sense of direction, manageable steps, talk about credit for achievements, and then talk about the future a little bit. We also need to talk about curiosity and flow. This is 7, communicate with self, eliminating with self and eliminate shoulds and should nots. And then the healthy conflict, being reasonable with ourselves and enjoying our feelings. And then the last one is dealing with loss that isolates us or helps us develop closeness. We identify typical ways people learn to avoid, explore spatial life, and the comfort with information, and then talk about questions and next step. This actual outline, which comes from a book I have, is quite a bit longer. They go for, I think, 14 to 16 weeks. And so there's a lot of information here. But I think we should probably get through 8 weeks before we decide if we want to do more or not. Questions about this? Okay, let's just go to the impact of COVID. And so when we think about it, we look at within the 30 days after the COVID hit, right? The world was in lockdown. So, and within 100 days, we had begun to change our whole behavior. So there were a lot of sleep problems, depression, and general anxiety spiked. For not just us, but across the world. So when you think about that, think about almost everybody. And it's interesting because now it seems like every magazine or paper article I pick up, there's a story about anxiety and stress in there. And in a way, that's kind of interesting to me, right? There's so much information that we could learn and so many different ideas and what works for different people. It's just kind of interesting. But this was an interesting fact that came out of one of the readings I was doing. 1 in 3 Americans experienced a panic attack during the COVID. I don't know why, but that shocked me. I know a lot of people deal with panic. And there were times when I began to have to talk myself down. I could feel myself getting worked up. And I maybe was even a little short with my husband who's in the other room. But yeah, our economics changed, right? And it's just really surprising how we still are effective. They keep saying that in America, many people actually ended up with more money, but the majority of people who actually lost their jobs, it's a sad state of affairs for them. So we stopped all cultural and entertainment, and that was kind of surprising. I have my neighbor down the way who we kind of check on. She's older. She loves to go to plays, and she asks me every time I'm there, have you heard if any of the plays are going to open? And it's like, well, no, I haven't heard of it, although I did hear now that I think Trollwood is offering their summer production. So maybe there is movement in that direction. Our information systems changed, right? Fake news was already in the news, right? But now it's like, our numbers rising, our numbers lowering. And all of a sudden our governors were having daily press sessions, right? Where they were telling us what's happening in our states, kind of leading to that anxiety of we can read something in summary, but when you're hearing it every day, it gets to be overload sometimes. And just society and rights, people began to grab things, right? Everyone felt they had the right to wear a mask, right not to wear a mask, those kind of things. And just the political nature, even though it was election, it kind of became heightened and everybody was kind of choosing sides. Then there's this category in the reading that I did called other. So other includes environmental, science, hospitals, health, technology, the militaries. They talk about famines that are coming and death, and how those are all related because people haven't been doing their normal activities in their normal life. So those are kind of the impacts that are shocking to me. And I don't know, is anybody feeling some of this too? And has there been a change? Okay, so
I can share your house. I I can share that we've been very, very fortunate. Neither of us lost our jobs. Our income has stayed the same. And even when we weren't working, our employers, well, my husband's on a contract, so he would get paid anyway, but I wasn't working and I was still getting paid. So very, very lucky. We're a little bit more introverted anyway, so staying at our house, it wasn't so hard. But
Yeah.
I do have to say, I do have panic attacks, and I only have them once a year, twice a year. They've been really good, but part of that too is because we've been very fortunate through this. But I had a panic attack when I got my second vaccine. For some reason, I was feeling weird things. And of course, then you think you're having an adverse reaction. But I did really miss some of the friendship things. That was, and I don't want to say depression because I don't particularly struggle with depression, but at times just that I need to see people, I need to see my friends was hard. And the constant negativity on social media and in the media was really hard to deal with at times.
That is very hard to deal with. So it was kind of interesting early in the in last summer, I went to the store, and here in the parking lot there were, I think it was 3 or 4 cars. They were vans, and they had all opened their doors and they had backed up to each other so that they could sit in the back of their van and have like a picnic. And it was right in the middle of the parking lot there. It was kind of funny. And I couldn't figure out, at first I thought, what the heck, but then it made me realize, yes, I know what's going on here, people, and it's hard not to see people. And I feel like sometimes you lose touch with people, I have one friend I used to talk to weekly. Well, now if I talk to her monthly, it's kind of a surprise, and so, yeah, it's kind of that extra effort. It's kind of getting easier and easier for me to hold up, and I have to watch that, although I'm usually a pretty social person. So kind of interesting. So when we look at some of the good, though, that came from the pandemic, we really look at the virtual connections that make it easy for people around the world to participate. I was able to take a tour of the Vatican, right, on my Zoom. And so some of those are really kind of fun to do, to think you get to see things that you wouldn't normally see. But we have to realize we can't replace first-person experience with the virtual, but we can foster dialogue, we can forge connections, and we can expand our viewpoint of the world. And so these are some of the good things. The pandemic affirmed the critical role scientists will play, and not just for this problem, but for the next several decades. And in fact, I got home a little early. I had the TV on tonight, and there's lots of organizations now that are fostering STEM, and they'll do that by having kind of weekend camps where this particular one was for women, for Black women, to kind of get into the STEM. They actually have only, I think she said it was 2% of all of the women in any of the sciences are Black. And so she was really focusing on that. It's also a time to be generous and supportive of one another. We shouldn't blame ourselves for feeling depressed or anxious, because this is normal, right? It's a normal response anytime there's change. And we can always promote mental health from nutrition, social connections, and to make sure we get adequate sleep and exercise. So those are kind of things that we can actually control within our own person. And that's kind of nice. A lot of times we don't think about that. We used to kind of go wherever or do whatever and not put it on a schedule. Now it feels like everything needs to be on the schedule. So there's kind of a summary of good things from a quote that I read. The things we've learned will differ for each of us, but we can share by asking the question, what can we learn from the pandemic? What should we learn? What can we take with us from living through a year like this? I can't say that it's easy, but I do believe after a year of upended life, it's worth considering what to take with us from this experience. I know that learning from experience is one of the best ways to build empathy. And that was Elizabeth Siegel. So one of the other things I did is because I was looking at all kinds of things on the internet. Like I said, can hardly open anything on the internet or Facebook or anything, and they'll talk about stress and different things. But these were two resources that were a little different. And so Erin's going to help me, and we're just going to look at these two sites because how it's a very different point of view. So Erin, can you bring up that first one?
Yep, let's stop you here, and then I'll bring up mine. Oops. And then I clicked on the wrong thing. Just a second.
Yeah, you kind of got to scroll down, Erin. So it's
Yeah, I was going to maximize the window, and then I clicked on something else. Okay.
what I liked about this one is that this is just 4 writers. And I was thinking maybe we could just read through these. So does somebody want to read, or you want me to read them? Okay. There is no rainbow without rain. I've been thinking a lot about what will come of this. Equality. The situation has shown us that we are all the same regardless of our religion, culture, customs, whether we are poor or rich. The virus simply does not choose. It connected us in a way. It shows us that we should all stick together. During this chaos, while many of us are in panic, it shows us the weight of humanity. It reminds us of who we are. Maybe the world would finally change. We humans are fragile by ourselves. Our strength lies in being part of community. We do not live without relationship, and we should never forget this. We have a very caring and shared connection between us, and it's amazing to see how we stick together at times. Sharing is caring. Sometimes we need to remember how important kindness is. We need to remember that we have been given a gift called life, and we should appreciate it. Everything can end tomorrow. Focus on what is important to us. When all is over, Earth will continue to spin and life will continue to flow again. The question is whether by then we will have learned our lesson. Let us be mindful of our Earth, and it will be kind to us. There is no rainbow without rain. Remember that. So it's just kind of interesting. She 14 or 15?
15.
Yep. So all of these writers were young, and I got a lot of delight in what they had to say. Do you want to just go down and maybe we can take a look at the next one? This one is 15 too. And where there's good in every evil. There's an odd saying that there is good in every evil that I will now use as a tiny consolation in this difficult, unexpected time. As a young teenager, believe me, it was hard dealing with this situation. And to everyone who's reading this and feeling helpless, I just want to tell you that you are not alone and it will be better. I am aware of everything that has been taken away from us due to this situation and all the unrealized plans, be it birthdays, travels, weddings, and sadly, we can't do anything about it. But we are not powerless. On the contrary, it is all of us together that can make the world a better place. If each of us respects the measures imposed by authorities, the situation will get better and it will pass much faster than expected. I can single out isolation, staying at home, as one of the most important measures. I know it sounds difficult, and believe me, at first this sounded impossible to me, just unfeasible. I found it hard and boring. I wasn't used to sitting in the same closed places for so long. But over time, I started to find hobbies. I tried things I had never tried before. I spent a lot of time with my parents. And even though I didn't get out, I exercised at home. I found I had time to watch TV series and read books I never had the time for before. Also, I have to admit that for me, online learning is much easier, more flexible, and more stress-free. One of the most important things I've learned while we're in this isolation is to care for myself and to devote more time to myself. So this goes on, and it just kind of, each person has something good to say, and maybe we can just read the last paragraph of the next one. Let's go back to the sentence. There is good in every evil. A simple sentence, but still so powerful. This is just one perspective of a young girl who is going through the same thing as many others. So don't forget, you're never alone. And so the next person, one of these people is 14 too, I think. Not this one though. This one's 15 too.
I can
So-
read one.
Yeah, that'd be good. What did you say?
I said I can read one.
Please. You want this one?
Sure.
There's just one more after this one, I think.
A pandemic that taught me to love. It'll take just a little patience and support for us to master this crisis, but together we can do it. We only need to respect the recommendations and measures issued by the state to protect ourselves, the people closest to us, and others who live in our community. We all know that it is not easy to stay at home, but taking a break to stop and reflect has its own virtues. If someone asks me how I'm dealing with the pandemic and how it influences me, I would say, I know it is not easy for us. I know it's not easy for those lying in the hospitals. I know it's not easy for those who lost someone. Life takes us in different directions. That's why it's important to live the moment without thinking of the past or the future. I sit at home, do my school assignments, go out on the balcony, have a tea or coffee, listen to good music. I can't count all the activities I do to stay positive. It matters to me that my brother, my parents, and grandparents are safe, and for them I do my best. I write essays, I paint, I read. This situation has taught me many things. It taught me to love, to listen, to care, to respect, and to help. Help, that's the word I'm looking for. What does it mean to help someone? Help someone to teach them something. Help someone by having a conversation with them. We should use this word in our vocabulary more often, so we can see a smile on people's faces more often. This situation taught me to love, not only to love a person, but also to love the little things in life.
This one is the last one. So, life's a lesson. Somebody want to read that? You see it? Life's a
Oh, if no one
lesson.
else, oh, I was gonna say, if no one else will read, I'll read.
Great, thanks.
I might have to squint because it's really small.
Okay.
Oh, let me see
Humans?
if I can zoom in, Kathy.
No, it's just that my cataracts are growing, and so I have to accommodate. It's okay. I still read a lot. Humans are very complex beings. They spend their whole life learning, but why wait for something bad to happen so that we learn how to appreciate the good? Why can't we appreciate the little things that actually make us happy? I never had a chance to think about the things that have happened to me. I wasn't appreciating many things, and I have given importance to so many things which weren't important at all. I didn't know that the rain makes me happy, or that the coffee I have on the balcony is tastier than the coffee in a coffee shop. I realized that reading books makes me happy. Playing cards and Monopoly at home wasn't that bad at all, and working out at home is better than at a gym. I realize that I'm a philanthropist and have a great sense of empathy, which makes me very happy. We learn how to live every day. We choose the path we will take. Just think about everything you dream of. It is good that we dream and work towards achieving a goal. Don't be afraid to work miracles on yourself. Don't be afraid to live as you deserve. Excuse me. It's normal to come across obstacles. That's how we learn when we overcome challenges. Life is a lesson. We learn every day, and we will continue learning every day. Everything doesn't have to be perfect in life for us to be happy and to appreciate ourselves and everything around us. We just have to be grateful. Wrong spelling. Remember, the best life lesson is learned through hard times and when we make mistakes. Enjoy your life and appreciate what you have. Just think about the fact that there are people in the world with less. Be happy and positive for everything around you, and you will become a stronger person.
So it's interesting because that grateful, there's another place in here too where it had grateful, but it was spelled that way. And I'm wondering, since all of these people are not from here, if they use that other way. But it was weird because it was in there twice, and I went ahead and corrected one of them, but I must kind of odd for me to correct somebody, a thing on the net. But anyway, do you want to just hop to the other one? The other one we won't read all the way through, but it has a list of just kind of come down. So just keep going a little bit further. You'll see the power of stillness. I don't think about that when I think of things I'm grateful for. I might be grateful for silence, but not stillness. And so that was interesting to me. Friends and family mean everything. This is Buddha, so this is a little different. And then nature continues to thrive, even if the world has shut down. Isn't that true? With all of the kind of things we had going on in Texas and across the world. So material goods mean nothing. And that little paragraph there talks about how, during this time, we begin to look at our things differently. And our health is gold. Essential workers are heroes. I think there's two more, one or two. Oh yeah. And then what will the outcome of all of this be? So they just listed 6, and I think that is true. Even though we were always thankful for nurses, if you know of somebody in the hospital and you go visit, you realize all the things they do. But in general, I don't think we're thankful for our healthcare providers. We just assume that they've got a job and they're going to go about it. But this gives us a whole different thought, all of that. So thank you, Erin. Is mine still up then?
You'll have to put it back up.
Okay, so. So I wanted to talk, because we were talking about this last time, of kind of how I look at this. And I said it depends on who you want to be. And so these are actual kind of things that were out on the net where it actually describes it. And somebody had given me one of these one time, and it was all tethered and stuff because I'd carried it around. but so let's just go through it. So what do I want to be during COVID? And
Gail.
so it's,
Could you click on the from current slide so we can?
oh, sure. Thank you. How about there?
Yeah.
Good.
Wonderful.
That's to see.
Thank you. Yeah, you can see it a lot better. Thank you. So we kind of talk about the fear zone, right? So when we were on the fear zone, we were grabbing food, toilet paper, and medications that we didn't really need, right? I think I went out to Walmart one time or to Costco and shocked because there was no toilet paper, right? So I spread emotions related to fear and anger. I complain frequently. I forward all messages I receive, whether they were good or bad or indifferent. Kind of like I'm still out here, right? And I get mad easily. So this is when we're in the fear zone, and this is kind of a normal early on kind of reaction many people had. And then we slowly move this to the learning zone. And the learning zone says, I start to give up what I can't control. Huge. That's a huge step, and I'm not sure that I've totally done that. So I stop compulsively consuming what hurts me, from food to news, right? How many people have stopped watching the news 3 times a day? Yeah, I was amazed at the number of people who do that. And I know we usually watch it twice, and boy, there are just days where I kind of throw up my hands and go to bed because I can't stand it. I identify my emotions, right? So I know what I'm feeling. I become aware of the situation and think how to act. I evaluate information before spreading something false. And I recognize that we are all trying to do our best. So that's where we are when we're in the learning zone. And sometimes we're still there, you know, when you hear about the pandemic and you hear that probably in another 10 years, there will be another one, right? That we need them and we need those viruses, but sometimes they get out of hand. But when you're in the growth zone, you think of others and you see how to help them. You make my talents available to those who need them. I live in the present and focus on the future. I'm empathetic with myself and with others. I think and appreciate others. I keep a happy emotional state and spread hope. I look for a way to adapt to new changes, and I practice gratitude. No, I practice quietude, patience, relationships, and creativity. So that's I think I'm slowly getting back to this one. I know I am worrying about some of the friends I haven't talked to while I'm making more regular phone calls. So one of the, when you Google this, you get different kind of graphics. And this was one of the other graphics I liked, and it actually was from a church. And so they had the action, so go from the growth zone to the action zone. And as you read through here, you'll think of people in our church who are doing these things. And I know some of you have done them all along. Check in on my neighbors. I write cards to, to the frontline workers. I donate blood. I support local businesses. I donate to my local food bank. I volunteer at a local church. I welcome to help the homeless and the vulnerables. I teach or read to children in an online or call or a chat. and I take time to pray for those impacted. And so it is interesting because even though these are kind of circles, right? I know people who might have been in here really big time, but they also did some of these things. And the more we can do these growth and action things, the quicker we're going to get out of these and on with our lives, right? But I also want to point out that there's nothing here that say we don't take every precaution we need. We wear our masks, we social distance, we wash our hands, you know, whatever that is. And I think we need to continue to do whatever we can to help this. And so that's important. But also when we think about our mental health, we're actually going from the fear zone to the learning zone, to the growth zone, and hopefully eventually the action zone. So sometimes we need little prompts. I know the other day on Facebook, somebody asked for a card and I got up and sent it, which I haven't done for a long time. So that was kind of fun, you know, to think maybe I'm moving and I need to keep moving. So does anybody have questions about these? Does anybody want to share like where they are or some of the
Hi, Gail. This is Tiffany. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi. As I yeah, it's really cool to see those different levels. I just want to share that listening to some of this would be like, okay, I'm starting to feel stressed because I can't do these things, and so I really am at through a place of peace on that. But I just want to share if others are, or, you know, in different seasons of life, like my whole focus has to be caring for the kids in front of me day to day. So there's, I think that's part of too, is like just seeing and being, you know, peaceful about where you're at. And I would love to reach out more, and I would love to do a lot of different things and for other people. But sometimes it's our family or, you know, a few people that really need us, and that's okay too.
It's very okay. And many of these things, when you think about this, if you're doing something for someone special within your family and bringing joy to their day, that's a big part of this action. And it takes a lot of energy to do some of those things.
Yeah, and I know sometimes I think there's something that you know, just in myself, you kind of look past that or think it has to be for others being outside the home, you know. And I wonder if for a lot of women and moms and, you know, caretakers, to just hear that what you do in your home is doing these things, you know, and not to think like that it has to be done out.
Yeah.
I think that might help. I mean, not only myself, but other women too, and just to value that.
Well, and sometimes when I think about this, you know, there used to be some sayings that I heard, but you know, if you are raising children and you're doing, that's some of the hardest jobs in the world, right? Is making sure that those children are being brought up so that they can live into their full, is really impacting the world.
Absolutely.
One person at a time, so to speak, but that one person is going to make difference, right? And so, and the joy that they bring not only to your family, right? It may seem like at times things are a struggle, right? I think as I had people that I impacted in the world, youngsters or family members that were young, you know, it's interesting because they want to be accepted too, right? And they might not realize any of this, right? So sometimes kids or people are dealing with difficulties may not realize that the world is going through all of this. And so we tell ourselves is important too. So that's kind of a big deal. But it also goes to the next part of my presentation. And part of it, what time do we have?
We have 15 minutes left. Or
Okay.
6:45.
Yeah, so the next part of my presentation is a little long. And so I kind of wanted to make sure we covered this material so that we have something about today, because it seems like today we're dealing with a lot of things that are thrust upon us, so to speak. But when we look at anxiety and stress, it's interesting because there's an article here. So my neighbor that I check on, she gets the Wall Street Journal, and she takes my Fargo Forum, and I take her Wall Street Journal after she's read it. And I opened it the other day. This one happens to be from the April 3rd, but it says, when the pandemic ends means the return of anxiety, right? We don't have the pandemic to kind of we have to deal with our own feelings and emotions, and that anxiety is there. You know, I think we can just go ahead and start. So like, this was my thing about back to anxiety and stress, right? Knowing that we continue with anxiety and stress, and that it's been heightened because you know, our basic nature is to reach out to people. And so when we feel like we can't do that, you know, then that adds to all of that stress. So, but the driving force is what I call this section. And I just want to talk a little about guilt. And then the second part of this is to talk about shame and how it comes. So I can either quickly go through parts of this, or we can save it for next week, because I don't think we'll get through all of it. But let's just talk about guilt is a healthy emotion. So when we have violated our own morals or ethics, that makes us feel guilty. And guilt leads to us to apologize, hopefully to change our ways. That's what we mean when we have a true apology, is we change our ways, and that it can bring us closer to others. So with guilt, people reaffirm their values, and the possibility of repair exists. It's the learning and growth are promoted through guilt sometimes, right? We learn, and we learn other ways too. But we all have some guilt. And so this is kind of talking about Erik Erikson, who is a psychologist, and there's a lot of counselors who will use his theory. But he loved to study child development. So the second stage of psychological development begins between 1 and 3. So the first part is kind of that bonding with our family and our mothers, all our whole family. But that's kind of the first, and 1 and 3 is where we develop trust and mistrust. And we give the message through touch, how we're fed, how we're talked to, and how we were treated. It determines the world is either safe and trustworthy, or a place that we need to protect ourselves. And we're given the message that somebody wants a relationship with us through our caregivers. It conveys that we are loved for our own right, that we have value and are special. So trust, this little thing keeps getting in my way all the time. Trust expects and relies on a consistent type of response. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could always be consistent? So anyway, from 15 months, 3 years, we began to look at shame versus autonomy. We begin to develop physical independence, and we experiment on or with hanging on and letting go. Kids also experiment with the word no, right? They know when to push it, right? They'll try different things. And they develop independence and they experiment with hanging on and letting go. So at this time, what they really need is a firm hand, but understanding while the parent is being emotionally available. Does that make sense? Healthy shame equals moments of embarrassment or shyness. So that's different, right? Than when we see somebody, a child who's really dealing with a lot of internal strife. They have the urge to do it myself. And if those, when they do that, if it destroys the bonds with the it shouldn't destroy the bonds of the caregiver. And independence and separation should be encouraged by the caregiver. If this behavior is being perceived as a threat, though, by the parents or the caregiver, children become confused and about the caregiver's boundaries. So if love is withdrawn, children begin to believe their feelings are wrong and the need for autonomy is misguided. So that's when kids begin to cling a little bit too much, which is normal, right? That's normal for kids. But after a while, if they're clinging and they're getting to be older, then somehow they've not developed that feeling that it's okay to experiment, to go out and be independent. So we all have a little bit of this, right?
Yeah.
Right? Kids want, I mean, if you watch kids, they react to your smile, right? You smile, they'll smile back, right? So we all want to do this. And I think that's what's important. Sometimes when people read about Mr. Erickson, they think, wait a minute here, right? You're going to blame the parents for everything? No, part of it is your own personality and how you perceive these things too, right? So let's just keep going. So from 3 to 6 years, we begin to internalize right and wrong. So we learn right and wrong at this age. We learn how behavior might hurt both ourselves and others. Guilt is the feeling that they have when they've done something wrong and have gone against their own developing moral values. So that's kind of where we begin to feel some of these feelings that we have. Guilt helps us realize we've hurt somebody. It leads us to apologize. It affirms our values, and it helps connect us to others. But let's say this doesn't happen, right? So we're looking at guilt versus shame. Guilt is about making a mistake. Shame is where we've taken on the feeling that we are the mistake. Guilt is a feeling and shame is an identity. So it's one thing for a kid, right, to maybe steal something. They stole the piece of candy, as opposed to being a thief where you take on that identity that there's something actually wrong with you and you're going to do it again and again. So sometimes the words we use really are important, and particularly for kids. But you know, when we think of these, we all are going to have events that arise in our life. And so it's important that we remember that this might become a pattern of behavior by both the parent and the child, as opposed to one incident where you make a mistake. That's being human. And so when we look at healthy shame, which is kind of that guilt, we realize our own limits. We're being human. We accept our limitations. It's also the beginning of spirituality. accepting ourselves is kind of like, I should be able to handle this on my own. That's what people say when they come in to talk about something, right? They go into their counselor and they're kind of frustrated and they say, I should be able to handle this, right? But the truth of the matter is, it's just a matter of accepting your limitation. And sometimes that feeling leads to frustration and more shames. So unhealthy leads us to try to be more than human and less than, did I not finish this? Let's see. Or less, less than human. So if we're unhealthy, it leads us to try to be more than human or less than human. Where if we just
say we feel less than human.
pardon?
We feel less than.
Less than human, right? Right, not good enough, right? I think probably, we all have a little bit of jealousy in us sometimes, right? But sometimes I think I should be able to do that, when the truth of the matter is that person's 20 years older, right? And I won't be able to do those things. And so it's all in there. We all have a little bit of it, but separating it out as kind of healthy and unhealthy is a good thing. So what's missing here? Why do people develop these feelings of shame? Because they've lost their sense of belonging. They don't think they're equal to others. A feeling of insignificant is core to cause of anxiety. So in anxiety, the feeling of being insignificant is kind of at the core and the cause of all anxiety. And we all, though, have those feelings of insignificance, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be times when you're not, right? So I always kind of use this example with some of the people I work with, right? And that's like, is it true, right? If you ask that question of yourself, it might be that it is true, right? So then you say, is it always true, right? So I can do first aid, right? But I can't be a brain surgeon. So if I'm thinking that I can do more than I can, or that I can't do anything, right? That I'm stupid because I can't do brain surgery, then that's it. And sometimes we use these over simplified exaggerations to explain to people that, when we look at this, there are times when I can be helpful, right? So maybe if I'm in the operating room, the most helpful thing I can do is stay out of the way, right? And so to kind of say that, is to say, when you have these feelings, to say, is it true, is a good question. And then, is it always true? Is it true in every situation? Because when we deal with anxiety, we're not talking about brain surgery, right? We're talking about just feeling inadequate because of something. And maybe it started way back when. And so people who are dealing with anxiety are never quite comfortable with the world. They're always trying to fit in. They're always trying to measure up, and they're trying to find a place for ourselves, right? And we want to feel alive. Or it means that if we are alive, we're in a constant state of stress. And the truth of the matter is, we don't have to be, right? We're human. So we don't have to have those feelings. And so this was kind of a hard section for me, but I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit more about recovery. So even though I'm using the word recovery and some people might object to that, I'm really talking about becoming comfortable with ourselves. And when we become comfortable with ourselves, we're learning to feel more spiritually connected to others around us. We realize that there's a power greater than ourselves. We're accepting our own limitations. And I think about AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. The first step is we are powerless over whatever it is that you're powerless over, and that our lives have become unmanageable. So when we're talking about stress and anxiety, we might be manageable, right? We're not there yet, but we're certainly dealing with some of the feelings that lead us to be anxious, to increase our mood, our nervousness, all of the things that go with anxiety, that stress, that worry, that sleeplessness. Is any of this connecting with people? Okay.
Yeah.
And so I knew this was a lot to cover. Let's see, I'm trying to think of what time we've got here, but it's a lot to cover, and we might go back and review some of this information next week if there's more people there. But those are kind of some of the things that I think we should talk about, is what do we do to overcome that? One of the things that have really helped me is daily devotionals. So I might not do meditation, but doing those devotionals have kind of kept me on an even keel. And so, and to set the goal for me quite a few years ago was to be consistent. When I was younger, my emotions kind of were up and down a lot, and people didn't know who was showing up, right? So I had to work really hard at what consistent behavior. And then to kind of think about goals for each of us. In other words, when you came to think about this particular program, there wasn't a lot of information, but kind of what were you thinking, and what is the mission? So if we know some anxiety is good, how much is enough, and how do we measure that for ourselves? And then we can look at the sense of the direction, what manageable steps we can take. We can talk about some of our achievements, past and present and current. A lot of things we don't realize about people, and we're pretty impressed that we actually fit in better than. And so then to talk about where the future of this is going, and is 8 weeks enough, or kind of, and for you, what are you thinking of doing, so that we can help each other with some of those goals.
I like that.
So what are people thinking? Would it be helpful to go back over, because this is written kind of as reminders to me to talk about, for me to fill this out and go back over it next time?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful.
Okay. Anybody else?
I do too, and I think you've given us a lot to think about, and I think I would benefit from reading back through the notes I've taken tonight, and then maybe after thinking about things, maybe having some questions or a better direction for myself.